Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is Nothing But Bangers, aka MBB, aka Bangers, aka I've got the updated, revised, revitalized Triumphant Light top 15 cards. Now, this list is going to be a little tricky. It was pretty difficult, and for the first time ever, I've sort of combined one card as sort of like a combo. So we'll take a look at that. Let's get to it. Let's dive right in. No honorable mentions, although there are a few cards that could potentially see some play and maybe even garner some attentions later on as the set goes on, or with the introduction of new cards. I think some of those cards to look out for would be stuff like Toxic Croak, Houndoom, Origin Form Dialga, the Psychic Rotom. Manectric is kind of cute, and also Staraptor, but that's a stage 2, so I'm kind of low on it. But I think all of those cards could definitely maybe see some more play as time goes on, and some of them have already seen some play. But let's get to the top 15, starting at number 15. Previously, I had it at number 6. The Shaman that basically lowers your retreat cost if it's on the bench. And the main reason why I have lowered this card so much is because I just think that the Healing Shaman is just so much better in most scenarios. I really, if I had to choose like which, I have one spot left in like a deck that I'm playing, most likely it's going to go to the Healing Shaman rather than the free Retreat Shaman or the one less Retreat Shaman. Like, that's probably where I would go in terms of choosing a card, because like it kind of boils down to, if you open the Shaman, which Shaman would you rather have, and then what Shaman has more upside? And in my opinion, both of the answers to those questions are the Healing Shaman. But I still respect this card enough to put it at the top 15, because in the future, if we do have like really aggressive EX decks that play it, just like 5-6 EX Pokemon that are all basics, like Shaman is going to be the glue that could potentially hold them together. But again, you got to ask yourself, like, is it better just to heal? Is that 10 HP more relevant than the free retreat, right? Because you can fix not the free retreat, but the one less retreat, because you can sort of fix that one less retreat with stuff like Leaf and X Speed. So I don't know, just something to think about as we move into the future. Number 14 is going to be Abomasnow. Now, previously, this card wasn't even ranked, and the only reason why I have it on this list is because if you've seen some of my other videos, I've talked about how Abomasnow on curve, when you have Arceus, like, feels pretty nice. Like, when you hit it on curve, it sort of feels like a miniature Starmie EX, and so I think that it's definitely like worth listing on this list. However, I'm not going to any tournaments or playing in any ranked mode with Abomasnow. I would rather just play the Origin Form Palkia and Manaphy, right? Because a lot of the time, if you're playing Abomasnow, you're probably playing Manaphy and Arceus. And if I'm going to play Manaphy and Arceus, I probably would just take the stage 1 out of it and just straight up play Origin Form Palkia. But again, this card is one of those Link Pokemon that does get a little bit of an extra ability because of Arceus EX or Arceus. But again, I just kind of would rather play other cards outside of Abomasnow. Like, I mean, hey, and if push comes to shove, I might even rather play something like a Glaceon EX, So again, that's why I've got it rated at number 15. Let's go to the next card. The next card I have is Garchomp EX. Previously, I had it ranked at number 10. It's coming in at number 13 on this list. The main reason why I have this card significantly low on this list compared to maybe some other EXs on this list, well, not really, but like, I think Gallade does what Garchomp tries to do a little bit better, and I think Rampardos is better than Garchomp probably in a lot of scenarios as well. Garchomp is really cool, like whenever you can go ahead and snipe things and everything like that, but again, I just think that there's a lot of things holding this card back, including the fact that it doesn't work with Cynthia because of mechanics, right? And then it's kind of got like a 3 energy attack cost compared to Gallade, which is 2, and Rampardos, which is 1. So when you look at like the 3 fighting like top end cards, like this card is maybe better than Machamp EX, right? But definitely, in my opinion, it's below Rampardos and Gallade. So that's just kind of where I'm at with this card and why I don't have it super high on this list. But again, you can definitely win some games with Garchomp EX. And if you're a Garchomp fan, hey, it's not a bad card. It's just not necessarily what I would consider like a top tier card that you can go win tournaments with. Number 12, which is actually staying the same. I think this is the one of the few cards on this entire list that's staying the same. Glaceon EX is really fascinating because there's a lot of weird times where like it can ping for damage that your opponent may not see coming if they're not experienced playing the card. But again, like I just look at this, and in a lot of cases you're better off just playing a bunch of basic Pokemon to go along with your Manaphy synergy or your like Manaphy Misty synergy, and Glaceon EX is just like not necessarily game breaking enough to really like warrant a spot in a lot of those water decks. On top of that, you have to play Eevee, which is usually not a great card to see unless you're just straight up evolving it immediately the next turn. And so again, I think that all of those factors kind of adding into one gives me the reason to lower this or keep this at a low rating like a number 12, even though, again, I do think it's better than Garchomp simply because it's a stage 1 that has pretty good support Pokemon around it that you can build. And although like the damage output is pretty similar, I would say that Glaceon, I think, is something that I would probably play before I would play a Garchomp EX. Now, again, the other thing to look at too is there's a lot of fighting decks going around, and playing an Eevee into those fighting decks can definitely feel a little bad. So again, got it at number 12. I think it's probably about where it should be, but let's get to the next one. So Probopass EX, I actually think that this card isn't like awful, but it's also like not great. If you compare it to something like a Glaceon, right? Like you're obviously not getting the extra damage in between turns, but I do like the fact that it reduces damage whenever it is able to successfully fire off an attack. And I like the support cards around it. I think Dialga EX in combination with Probopass and Adaman, and then you've got your potions and your giant capes. Like I think like that's a lot of damage manipulation, and that can definitely make some decks feel really bad, right? Like some decks don't do a lot of damage in one attack, and that is where Probopass is going to really be able to shine if you're able to evolve it and attack with it. The other thing that I look at here is like, honestly, it's not going to win, probably any big tournaments at all. And it's going to be very tough to even get top cut with all of the 3 EXs that I just recapped and kind of ranked. But out of the 3, I do think that Probopass, when things are going well, I think that the Probopass is probably better than the other 2 EXs, right? Like when you're able to ramp it with Dialga and back it up with stuff like Potion, Adaman, and Giant Cape, I think it's just better than Glaceon and Garchomp, And so that's just kind of my opinion on it. And again, like, hey, maybe I'm biased because the card slightly resembles me. I don't know. I don't want to go. We'll leave that alone. But let's get to the next one. So coming in at number 10, previously had it at number 5, is Heatran. And the main reason why I dropped this card so much in this like re-ranking of the cards is because, for one, like the 2 energy attack is a little awkward. And then like it doesn't necessarily have like a ton of bulk. And then on top of that, you still need the Arceus to make this card good. And also, you have to have damage on it to really get the max value out of it. So there's just a lot of like conditional things to make this card good. And that really worries me, especially in a meta that can be very fast. Like all of a sudden you're staring down a Manaphy and it's ramped 2 turns, or all of a sudden you're staring down a Dialga and an Arceus and both can attack you for big amounts of damage. Or maybe you're staring down a fighting deck. All of a sudden they put down Lucario and they're swinging for big amounts of damage. Now the good thing about Heatran into those fighting decks is, hey, if they are not able to one hit you, right, and like one hit KO you, which is very hard for those decks to do without Rampardos, then like, hey, Heatran can line up pretty well into these fighting decks. But again, I just look at like how slow it can be in a lot of different matchups, and like, grass isn't necessarily super popular at the moment. And I think that all of those factors lead me to drop this card in the ranking. But like, make no mistake, if this card had been around like in the previous meta, like I think that it definitely would have seen play, even without the free retreat bonus that the link ability gives you when it comes to having an Arceus on the board. But again, I think that this card is probably just not as good as I thought it was, and who knows, maybe things could change as more cards come out. But again, I just look at the bulk, I look at the conditions, and I just think, hey, this card is just probably not as good as some of the other cards on this list. Crobat is a card that has a little bit of a side grade when it comes to Greninja, and then on top of that, it does have that conditional link ability where you have to have Arceus, which can be pretty, you're probably going to have Arceus in a lot of cases by the time that you're able to evolve a Crobat. But if there's ever a scenario where the Arceus gets knocked out or you're not able to find the Arceus, you're going to feel pretty bad with Crobat. The free retreat is great. The 1 energy attack for 50 is great because there are times where you can basically finish things off with the attack. And, that's really nice. And so there's a lot of good things going for Crobat. But I think in the current format where playing a stage 2, like your stage 2 needs to be busted. It needs to be busted in the way that like either it needs to attack for a large amount of damage, it needs to break the mechanics of the game, or it needs to have a tremendous amount of bulk. Like there's got to be something going for why you're playing a stage 2. Otherwise, I think the format is going to be so fast that you're just going to like either not find your stage 2 in time to really make a difference, or by the time your stage 2 gets out, like they're able to like deal with it, So I just think that like stage 2s are probably pretty rough. But again, like when Crobat is on the board and you're like staring across the table from it, or like, your opponent has it on the field, like Crobat is very intimidating, especially when they start pinging you for 30. Because again, like the fact that it does 30 versus Greninja's 20, some people may not think that that's a big deal, but 30 definitely changes math, and like 30 is obviously more than 20. So I do think that Crobat, again, it's a pretty good card, but for a format right now, like what we're seeing, I just don't think that it can see a lot of success at the top tier levels of tournament play. And I think that that's part of the reason why you haven't seen as many people bringing Crobat to these tournaments as well. So this is the first time that I'm ever going to do this on this list. I've actually got 2 cards that I'm going to put together because that's basically the only way to evaluate them. Like if you evaluate Barry alone and you don't factor in the partner, I think that it makes this card significantly like worse to rate. And so I've got Barry and Snorlax coming in at number 8. It was previously not ranked at all. And so in my opinion, the reason why I have this, where I have this on the list is it's energy manipulation in a weird way. And, swinging for 100 in a 1 prize Pokemon is pretty decent. And the fact that you can combo this with something like a Magnezone, right? You can combo this with something like a Manaphy in a 1 prize deck. I think that those factors lead me to have it higher on the list than cards like Crobat, cards like Heatran, card EX Pokemon like Probopass, Glaceon, and Garchomp, simply because I think it's easier to build a deck of 1 prizers around this combo of cards more than it is to like play a stage 2 Pokemon or play a conditional stage 1 Pokemon that may not be very good, and some matchups are just like maybe too slow. I think that, hey, having a 2 energy attack that could potentially hit for 100 on a 1 prizer is pretty good. And although like Barry, you can't really recycle supporters, so really you only have like a maximum of 2 shots with Barry. I do think that there will be scenarios where, hey, you're still able to power up that Snorlax as much, maybe up to 4 energies to really take advantage of it, even when you don't have Barry. And depending on how you construct the deck, again, like there's the Magnezone variants. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a way to play this with Manaphy, although opening Snorlax with like, no way to really get out of the active feels a little bad. But again, I just look at the fact that it does kind of break the mechanics of the game a little bit, and it's pretty decent damage output for a one prizer, and that's why I've got it so high on my list in the first ever 2-card combination ranking on my top 15. Adamin is another supporter from the set. Previously I had it ranked at number 9, and now I have it ranked at number 7 because I do think that steel types do have a really good supporter in their toolbox. Now, not every steel deck, right, is playing Adamin, but I think that in the times where you can play majority steel type Pokemon and make use of Adamin, I think that it's really good because it basically functions as like kind of like another giant cape, that can kind of surprise your opponent and kind of throw off their math. And in a tournament setting, right, they can see it in your deck list most likely, but again, like they never know if you have it until you play it. And so I think that Adamin, if you play it the way that you can get the max value out of it, where your opponent's going to attack, and that this can change your Pokemon from surviving 1 turn to 2 turns, I think that makes this card very unique and also very playable. I have it higher than Berry just because I think that the cards that Adamin boost are better than the cards that Berry boost, right? Like, I'm not going to talk about Staraptor because it's a stage 2 that's conditional with Berry, but Snorlax is a lot easier to use with Berry, right? But when it comes to Adamin, like, there's a lot of different steel type Pokemon and ways that you can play steel Pokemon, right? Like Dialga Probopass, Dialga Skarmory, different combinations of like maybe Skarmory aggro, like with other cards like maybe that Wormadon. So like I do think that the ways that you can play Adamin like outnumber the ways that you can play Berry, and also the upside of Adamin is like equally or better in some scenarios than Adamin or than Berry, right? I think Adamin in a lot of cases is probably as good or better than Berry, although the times where you can deal 100 very early with Berry is it's chef's kiss. But again, I've got Adamin above it right now just because it's not as narrow, and again, I do think that it's just as good, maybe slightly worse in some scenarios, but again, I think it's pretty dang good. Leafeon is a card that I moved down from the number 2 ranking, and I gotta admit, I was really high on the performance of this card at the midnight release, and as I played it more, I thought it was pretty good. But again, looking at the tournament outlook, it's just not good enough for whatever reason, right? There's a lot of reasons, right? Leafeon is just like not performing very well in the tournament setting right now. And part of it is because I think that there's other decks that are able to heal just as well as the Erica decks used to be able to. And then I also think that, it just is a little glassy, right? Like Serebii and Leafeon are a little glassy. You can make the argument, hey, Leafeon Venusaur, well, like you're just asking to brick and like not find evolution pieces and like the top tier tournament level, right? Now, obviously you can win games with that deck, like no doubt about it, right? Like I've seen people get their 5 wins with Leafeon Venusaur, but again, I just don't think at like the top tier tournament levels, Leafeon currently in its current form is able to really like push the boundaries of the Arceus Dialga decks, the Rampardos decks, the Palkia decks, the 18 trainer decks. Like I think it even struggles with those to a degree. So again, like it's a good card that definitely like has a great ability, but for some reason, like I think something is just holding this back, and that something is probably like a combination of like the current meta and also the fact that like the current card pool has just as good a hill and some other decks as well outside of Leafeon and Serebii, or Leafeon and Venusaur, or Leafeon Executor. I don't know why you would play that, but yeah, just all of those combinations. Looking at number 5, I used to have this at number 8. I think that I moved it up simply because the game feels pretty fast and Carnivine can apply early pressure that really can win the game. You saw how Skarmory had a nice impact on the game last set, but I think Carnivine is probably, you know, up there in terms of power level, and it's got great support around it, right? Like, it's got the Ericas around it, it's got the Arceus around it. Like, the support with Skarmory was a little sus, but with Carnivine, I feel like the support Pokemon around it are just better, right? The support cards that you have around Carnivine are just better. And so, like, if you made me build a deck right now to go to compete in a tournament and you said, hey, you got to play Carnivine or Leafeon, I'm playing Carnivine, right? And the main reason why I'm playing Carnivine is because I'm hoping that early aggression that allows, you know, hopefully me to catch my opponent off guard and then hopefully build something in the back, right? Like, hopefully I'm able to build something in the back. But the problem that I see with Carnivine is, like, I'm not sure what you do after Carnivine, right? Like, I'm not sure if, like, putting 3 energy on an Arceus is, like, really that advantageous. Like, it feels really slow. It feels like you have to play something that is either damage manipulation, like maybe like a Greninja or something. Like, you have to play something else that combos with Carnivine to really make it powerful. And I think that the partners that Carnivine has right now, like, although, like, pretty decent compared to what Skarmory was working with last set. I mean, people were playing freaking Wormadon with Skarmory. You know what I mean? Like, obviously the cards around Carnivine are better in my opinion. So I do think that, like, there's a little bit of an issue of, like, finding other cards that synergize with Carnivine. Because again, you want some form of ramp, you want some form of, like, breaking the mechanics of the game. And you hear me say that a lot in my videos. And just to, like, clarify, when I say breaking the rules of the game, I mean, like, taking an extra prize, attaching more than 1 energy per turn, right? Having an ability that, you know, maybe no other Pokemon in the game has, whether it's the max damage or you have the most bulk. Like, I think that those things are considered, like, in my opinion, like, breaking mechanics of the game or being, like, very powerful compared to the rest of the cards. And I think that, like, that's something that you need to look for as you're evaluating cards and trying to figure out, like, whether or not they're good. But again, Carnivine coming in at number 5, pretty decent. So this is a card that wasn't ranked. Origin Form Palkia is a card that I didn't have ranked. I ignored it when I saw it, and I was mistaken 100%, because this card is pretty sweet, right? Like, obviously it requires other cards around it to be good, but the thing is, there are other cards that are really good that combo with this, right? Like Misty, pretty decent, right? When it flips heads, you're, like, loving life, unless you're playing against it. Manaphy works pretty nice with these Palkias, right? Like, whether it's the EX or the Origin Form. And so, like, the support cards around Origin Form Palkia are the reason why I have it coming in at number 4 on this list. I just think it's a really good card because of the support Pokemon around it. Make no mistake, if we got another EX that was just as good as, like, you know, Articuno, or as good as, like, Palkia EX, you might want to play that instead of Origin Form Palkia. And hey, the thing is, like, you probably want it to be a 1 prizer, and, like, that's another bonus with this card, is the fact that it's a 1 prize Pokemon that you can basically line up Manaphy into Origin Form Palkia into Palkia EX. So, like, make no mistake, like, hey, sure, you could play Articuno EX and Palkia EX with Manaphy, but I think that Origin Form, like, performs better because it's a 1 prizer. So again, like, if we were to get another 1 prize Pokemon that maybe had similar damage output, or maybe as much bulk or more bulk and maybe same retreat cost, I think it could definitely take the place of Origin Form Palkia. But for the current state of the game, with the current tools that Water has in its toolbox, I think that number 4 is definitely a justifiable ranking for Origin Form Palkia. Sudowoodo is a card that I had at number 4 previously. I got it at number 3 right now, and Sudowoodo just has a great place right now. It's got great synergy with Lucario, and obviously the times where you can line up Sudowoodo into an EX Pokemon, it just feels great. Obviously, it doesn't feel great if your opponent only needs 1 more point and they can 1-hit KO your Sudowoodo. But in other scenarios, I mean, Sudowoodo, it puts your Pokemon it puts your opposing EX Pokemon on a clock. And again, when you combine it with cards like Lucario, when you combine it with cards like, you know, Pokemon tools like Rocky Helmet or Giant Cape that help you manipulate damage or survive another turn, when you combine it with cards that prolong its health or prolong its life. I think that like that's a big deal, and that's a big reason why this card is pretty good, right? And I don't know how the future is gonna like power creep like these Pokemon, but like the way I look at this card is like Tauros was pretty decent, right? This card is like a faster, lower damage capped Tauros, right? And so you can kind of start to see like, hey, I mean, we are seeing cards that are kind of like redesigned, and they're just like power creeped versions of it in a lot of ways, right? Like I made this argument in some of the comments from other videos. Like in my opinion, like Sudowoodo is probably an upgrade from a Tauros, right? Crobat probably a side grade, maybe an upgrade or a downgrade depending on how you build your deck from Greninja, right? Crobat and Greninja. And then you've got Arita. Arita is basically I would probably say it's a power crept Erica just because it can heal multiple Pokemon at once, right? Like you can potentially heal 80 to 160 damage in one turn with Arita, which is insane, right? And so again, like even Arceus EX, it feels, hey, Pikachu EX was pretty good, and Arceus EX is almost, I would argue a power crept version of it, right? And so again, I just kind of look at a lot of the cards that are currently in this set, and I think that the good ones are pretty much like power crept versions of other cards. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's just like my observation, right? And again, Sudowoodo, I think it's a great card. I think it's going to be played until we get another power crept version or a different way to deal with Pokemon EX, right? So let's get to number 2. Number 2 is a card that I just mentioned, and previously I had it at number 3, is Arita, and Arita heals 40 damage from your water Pokemon from your Pokemon that have a water energy, excuse me. So if any of your Pokemon have a water energy and they also have damage, Arita can heal it for 40. Right, and that's huge. I could see a day where maybe we play aggressive decks that maybe have colorless attackers, and you're playing Arita just because like it helps you get more value out of your aggro Pokemon, right? So again, like there's a lot of ways that this card can be played. Obviously, the big thing is 18 trainer decks have got a lot stronger with Arita, giving them access to basically a version of Erica, right? And so like Arita is just like really good. And then you take a look at the Palkia decks. There's just a lot of avenues where Arita comes in for these water decks or these Manaphy decks and like makes those decks better. And so I think Arita definitely is a well-deserved top 2 in the set. And again, previously had it at number 3, but with how far Leafeon has fallen, I think that Arita definitely deserves this spot at number 2. For number 1, Arceus EX should not really be a surprise for people. I had it at number 1 previously. And, if you just like look at the card itself, like take away the ability, take away the fact that it, activates the link abilities from other Pokemon. If you just told me that there was a card that could do, 130 damage for 3 energy, that's decent. And then the fact that it's a basic Pokemon, that's pretty decent, right? So then you factor in the fact that it's got Dialga, you can put Cape on it, it doesn't take, it can't be affected by special conditions. Like you add all these things together, you're like, okay, yeah, that's a pretty good card. So it makes a lot of sense why this card is decent. And I think that Dialga existing has definitely made this card a lot more playable. I think that one avenue that maybe hasn't been explored very much is that similar avenue that we see in that Palkia deck, right? You see Manaphy, Origin Form Palkia, and then Palkia EX. So my question is there any magic sauce to playing Manaphy Arceus and like another one prizer? Is there any sauce to that, right? Is there any sauce to maybe playing, I don't know, the Arceus over the Palkia, right? Or is the fact that Palkia hits for 150, the Palkia EX hitting for 150, does it matter so much that you would rather play that, right? But again, Arceus EX, very good card. Arguably, I would say that Dialga and Arceus may be the best deck we've ever seen in the game's history so far, right? And I know I said that with Dark Zone, but right now, the way things are looking, the way the deck is performing, I think if you played this deck in any other, format with the other sets, I think that the deck would dominate, right? And so again, that's just my thoughts. I think that this is definitely justifiable to put this card at number 1. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this top 15. What cards did I miss? What cards did I have too low or too high? What do you think about the list? And again, we've got ranked mode coming up in a few weeks. Can't wait to make content for that. But as always, thank you so much for taking time out of your day for me to be background noise. Maybe it was entertaining, or hey, maybe you learned something. But until next time, I'll catch you later. Peace.